Hey everyone, welcome back to Canada, the Illusion of Freedom and System of Control. This is part 3, the Illusion of Confederation. Today we'll do another factual examination of the constitutional problem by another constitutional expert. Today we will be reviewing a booklet written by Russell Rogers Smith. Here we go. Alberta has a sovereign right to issue and use its own credit. A factual examination of the constitutional problem by Russell Rogers Smith, published in 1937. And down here on the bottom, we see the note. The information contained in this booklet was placed before Premier Aberhart and members of his cabinet by Russell Rogers Smith in the McDonald Hotel, Edmonton, in October 1935. Premier Aberhart, I believe, was the 7th Premier of Alberta, and at the time wanted to initiate a social credit system for Alberta. Russell Rogers Smith presented this information, saying, Premier Aberhart, Alberta is a sovereign nation. You have every right to do as you wish. You don't need the central legislature's permission. By checking the information in this brochure, it can be proved that Alberta has a sovereign right to issue and use its own credit. If, however, the members do not do this, they can be justly accused by their electors of incompetence or worse. The facts are taken from statutes at large, from the archives, and from original historical sources which are irrefutable. So we can say the same today. We can accuse our electors of incompetence or worse, because everything we've been taught about Canada is a lie and fraud. Canada did not confederate in 1867, and every province became a sovereign nation December 11th, 1931, after the enactment of the Statute of Westminster. The attempt to federate the colonies of British North America. The reason the request of the colonies to be permitted to form a federal union was refused by the Colonial Office in 1867 was because the United States were pressing Great Britain for a settlement of claims for indemnity arising out of the actions of the British Navy during the Civil War, for which Great Britain acknowledged responsibility in the Treaty of Washington. The terms of this treaty could only be settled by retaining Canada as a colony. So there's no way the Colonial Office was going to let Canada form a federal union. Just some history on the Treaty of Washington and what John A. Macdonald had to say about it. And during this time, John A. Macdonald brought forth with other delegates the Quebec resolutions. On arrival to London, he immediately convened the delegates in the Westminster Palace Hotel December 4th, 1866, where they sat until December 24th, drafting the Kingdom of Canada draft of the bill, the BNA. Each delegate signed a separate copy. These are carefully preserved in the archives of Ottawa. A draft was sent to Lord Carnarvon, Secretary of State for the Colonies, by John A. Macdonald, December 26, 1866, and he had a reply dated the 28th, stating that the draft was being sent to the printers to be printed. This draft of the bill, which contains the following repealing clause, was rejected by the Colonial Office. So again, there's no way the Colonial Office was going to free the provinces of Canada to form a federal union. This is from the Canadian delegates, which was rejected. From and after the Union, all acts and parts of acts passed by the Parliament of Great Britain, the Parliament of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, the Legislature of Upper Canada, the Legislature of Lower Canada, and the Legislature of Nova Scotia or the Legislature of New Brunswick, which are repugnant to or inconsistent with the provisions of this act, shall be and the same are hereby repealed. So the Colonial Office said, no way, not going to happen. And down here we see, it's not difficult to understand why the Colonial Office objected to Canada's request for self-government. It would have been a suicidal policy on the part of Great Britain to grant the provinces of Canada the right to create a federal union. It was imperative for the best interests of Great Britain that Canada be retained as a colony, so that they could settle the terms they had tentatively agreed to in the Treaty of Washington. In the Parliamentary Library at Ottawa, Viscount Bury, the author and member of the Imperial Parliament, frankly tells us that the interests of Canada were sacrificed to make peace between England and the United States. Just some more history. And now, how did we get the BNA Act, 1867, which of course is now known as the Constitution Act, 1867. By changing the name of a document does not change its legal status. It never was a constitution, and it still is not a constitution. In a communication dated December 28, 1866, Lord Carnarvon acknowledged receipt of the draft of the bill submitted by John A. Macdonald, chairman of the Canadian delegates, and told him that he was sending it to the printers to be printed. Again, this was done as we have in the archives at Ottawa printed copies of this draft. Each delegate signed his own copy. Next, the British North America Act passed the second reading of the House of Commons without being printed. And it says, see the Hansard, February 26, 1867. The Hansard is the official record. The minutes of the meetings at which the British North America Act was drafted have never been made public. Referring to the Hansard, we find that the bill was introduced by Lord Carnarvon to the House of Lords February 9th, 1867 in the following words. The bill opens by reciting the desire of several provinces to be federally united. That's on the official record. That's how it opened. That was the statement. The actual words of the preamble, by reason of request of the colonies for federal government, it is expedient, therefore, that they have laws and regulations to guide them. Lord Campbell, the leader of the opposition in the House of Lords, in opening his speech at the second reading of the bill, said, "The bill is founded, I believe, on what is termed the Quebec scheme of 1864. Our lights, indeed, may be imperfect upon this part of the subject, and I will not dwell upon it. But one thing is clear, the preamble of the resolution comes to us in clear and perfect authenticity. So at the time of the second reading, they believed that they were freeing the provinces to form a federal union. There is no reason to doubt that the House of Lords believed that they were enacting a measure that would permit the provinces to form a federal union. You can read it in the official record, which is the Handstead. The page which sets forth the enunciation of the motives for which the measure was enacted is not part of the printed copies of the Act received in Canada. Instead of this, we have a substitution. Whereas the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one dominion. This is not a true statement and is discussed under the heading, What is the BNA Act? So the page that was passed, but not printed, it was never printed, that was passed by the UK Parliament was substituted before it was brought to Canada to say, whereas the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one dominion. That's fraud. The act that passed in the UK is not the act that came to Canada and is the basis of our entire country and government, which they claim is also our Constitution. Now, the Privy Council in the UK said this: the object of the Act was to create a federal union, entrusted with the exclusive administration of affairs in which they had a common interest, each province retaining its independence and autonomy. So even the Privy Council interprets it as this: we were going to free them so they could federally unite. But the Colonial Office couldn't allow it. Continuing on. The object of an act supersedes in importance any subsequent section, period. The object of the act, that's the preamble, supersedes in importance any subsequent section. Why was the page which contains this deleted from the printed copies circulated in Canada? Fraud. It was to twist the measure so that Canada should be retained as a colony. And the big lie of Confederation started right then and there. It was never a confederation, it was a united colony. British North America Bill enacted 1867. After passing the House of Lords, it was taken to the Commons, February 26, 1867. The debate there centered around the appropriation to the intercolonial railway. The purpose of the act was not discussed. So the preamble and purpose of the act was not even discussed in the House of Commons. It evidently was assumed that this had been debated in the Lords. One member asked the government, why all the haste in enacting this measure? I'm not sure I will have anything against it, but it affects 4 million people, and we should have an opportunity to study the measure, which is now in second reading, and it's not been printed. This same person also brought up the fact that strenuous opposition was expressed by Nova Scotia. A protest against the act was signed by 30,000 people of Nova Scotia, which in fact was more than 50% of the population. And this was brought up at the same time. Yet, it was pushed through and became effective in Canada July 1st, 1867. What is now known as Canada Day, the date of Confederation. So, Nova Scotia sent a delegation led by Joseph Howe to place their petition before the Imperial Parliament that Nova Scotia be relieved of this measure or a royal commission of inquiry be appointed. They voted against it. More than 50% of the people of the province. They sent a delegation to present it to Imperial Parliament. And big surprise, it was as Dr. Tupper predicted, defeated, the vote being 183 to 87. Nova Scotia was compelled against her wish to become a member of the Dominion. Does that sound like a confederation? Nova Scotia was compelled against her wish to become a member of the Dominion. Does that sound like confederation to you? In a speech on leaving London, Howe said, "We go home to share the perils of our native land, in whose service we consider it an honor to labor, and whose fortunes in this darkest hour of her history it would be cowardice to desert." So he went home with his tail between his legs, saying, we're forced into it, we've got to do the best we can. What is the British North America Act? The British North America Act is not and has never been legal and valid as the Constitution of Canada. Canada has no constitution. The Act is a private bill conceived and drafted by the Colonial Office and enacted into a statute by the Imperial Parliament, uniting 4 colonies of North America into one colony, one British colony. The British North America Act is placed in the same category as it affected only Canada, being a private bill, and they were discussing it affected only Malta. The BNA affects only Canada, which is also a private bill. A private bill must always have a preamble, the recitals of which must be proved. So the preamble must be proved in Parliament. It must be read, it must be printed. This is the preamble, this is the purpose of the act. Here we go. This is a substantial enunciation of the motives which impelled the Parliament to enact the statute. It is the most important part of the Act, superseding in importance any of the subsequent sections. The Act must be read and construed as a whole, although one section may bear a wider and another a more limited meaning. So it must be read and construed as a whole before it's passed, which never happened. The Governor General is the government, with power to appoint a council to aid and advise him, or he can remove them from office at his discretion. The custody of the Great Seal is granted to him, the power to appoint judges, justices of the peace, commissioners, deputies of himself, lieutenant governors of the provinces, and members of the Senate. He can remove any person from office exercising any official power in our Dominion, including the Premier, Prime Minister of Canada, and the Speaker of the Senate. Insofar as the provinces are concerned, he takes the place of the Queen and Secretary of State. In other words, any legislation of the legislatures of the provinces can be disallowed by him. Further, the provinces cannot refer any legislation so disallowed to the imperial parliament or to the crown. So the Governor General has the final say on behalf of the crown in Canada, period. The Governor General appoints people to advise him. There was no Confederation. There is nothing in the historical record which can be cited to support the story of Confederation. There is nothing in the Act to alter in any essential respect the colonial relationship or to weaken the Crown's headship. Nor is there anything in the Act to indicate a surrender in any degree of that fundamental principle of the British government, the full legislative and executive power to govern over and throughout the British Empire. The BNA united 4 colonies under the British Crown. Period. That's all that it did. An examination of the historical record shows that fraud was recorded in at least 4 instances in relation to its enactment, the BNA that is. This is not sufficient to remove the statute. Fraud must be proven from the wording of the Act itself and the manner in which the words are used. This is the law in relation to statutes. So it has to be, fraud must be proven from the wording of the Act itself and the manner in which the words are used. Is the British North America Act fraudulent? From the words and the manner in which the words are used. It is. At least the copy that we have. A federal union must be free and sovereign, whereas a colony must be subservient. No country could be both at the same time. How can you be free and sovereign, yet subservient to a queen? Can't happen. The words are opposite in their meaning. There is no power in heaven or earth that can pass a law to arbitrarily create a federal union. It must be a mutual agreement between those adopting their constitution. No agreement of any kind has ever been signed between the provinces of Canada. Now there's going to be some people out there arguing, well, yes, that happened through the Canada Act in 1982. However, it's still based on the BNA Act. The federal government became de facto December 11th, 1931, through the passing of the Statute of Westminster. So they had no authority to write the Canada Act and the Constitution Act 1982. Furthermore, they took it to a foreign monarch for assent. The people of Canada were never given the opportunity to vote, to have any input. It was created by Pierre Elliott Trudeau's federal government. As an enunciation of motives actuating the Parliament to enact the statute, the words federally united into one dominion and the manner in which the words are used constitutes fraud, and brands the British North America Act as a fraudulent measure. It is impossible to be federally united and a dominion at the same time. So there we go again. Federally united into one dominion. We'll learn more about colonies and dominion and being federally united, moving along. Russell Rogers Smith, in his studies of the constitutional problems, said, okay, I need to get my hands on a certified copy of the BNA here in Canada. And in his search, which is well documented in booklets he's written in addition to this one, there's a brief overview here which we'll just skim over. So he's searching for a certified copy of the BNA. He goes to Ottawa. He examines the documents in the archives in Ottawa. He finds a bunch of stuff, the Quebec Resolution, the Kingdom of Canada, all of that stuff's in there, no BNA. At my request to be shown a certified copy of the BNA, he regretted that he had no such copy on the records. He suggested, okay, I'm going to send you to the Privy Council. Privy Council didn't have it. They said, well, we'll send you to the Governor General's office. That's his letters patent. Certainly the Governor General's office will have it. Not finding this act, he got handed a note to go see the parliamentary librarian. Nope, couldn't find it there. The librarian sent him to the office of Secretary of State. Nope, couldn't find it there. Finally, the clerk of the Senate. He has a vault where important papers are kept. Nope, wasn't there. Not finding a certified copy, which is presumably the charter of the Dominion government, I suggested that it might have been destroyed in the fire which burned the main building in 1916. But I was assured that all the documents had been saved. Some had been discolored by water. All that was lost were some pictures of the gallery. So, not finding a certified copy of the charter which creates and grants authority to the Dominion government. Can't find it. Not in Canada. So then he says, well, it must be in the Senate Journal. Because the BNA certainly must have been put before the Senate. So there'll be record of in it in the Senate Journal. Nope, not in the Senate Journal. Then he asks, was this act ever placed before Parliament? You will have to ask Dr. Bouchain, was the answer. Dr. Bouchain was the clerk of the House of Commons. Returning to the Commons, Dr. Bouchain made an exhaustive search of his records without finding any reference to the BNA Act in his journal. Never in the House of Commons, no record of the Parliament, no certified copy of the BNA Act ever came to Canada. Well, doctor, I was informed that we had no certified copy of the Act in Vancouver by the Chief Justice of British Columbia, but was assured that I would find it in Ottawa. If it were in Canada, it would no doubt be in Ottawa. So I think we can assume, for the purpose of my investigation, that no certified copy of the British North America Act was ever brought to Canada. Is that so? After searching through all the records in Canada, they could not find it, and the clerk of the House of Commons finally replies, I am very much afraid that you are correct, that no certified copy of the British North America Act ever came to Canada, which is the founding documents of our Confederation, which is our Constitution Act 1982. Certified copy never came to Canada. Why not? Because the first page was changed. The preamble was changed to keep Canada a colony. After the act was passed by the British Parliament, Feb 29, 1867, printed copies were brought to Canada. These, however, do not contain the first page, which sets forth the enunciation of the motives and the purpose of the enactment. Why was this most important page deleted? Fraud, that's why. This is a vital question and can be best settled by having a certified copy sent to Canada. Well, since all the nonsense with Trudeau and his Canada Act 1982, I doubt we would get a certified copy, because that would just open a big hornet's nest for both the UK and for Canada. The provinces of Canada will then no doubt form a confederation or federal union as they wished and set forth in the resolutions of 1864. No agreement was ever signed by the provinces of Canada or their representatives to confer power on a central government, which is the only way a constitution can be created. First, representatives of the provinces are appointed or elected to be a constituent assembly where the agreement is drafted. This agreement, after ratification by the electors, is called a constitution. So the provinces still have not had constitutional conventions, written our own constitutions as sovereign nations, and then after our constitution and form of government is established for each province, we can then choose to or not to federally unite. That never happened. Those of you that are pointing to the Canada Act 1982, it was never ratified by the people. It was written by the Trudeau government, period. It was assented by a foreign monarch. It was passed through a foreign parliament. Now let's examine the difference between a federal union and a colony. The definition of a federal union as given by our law dictionary, and the only definition acceptable in a court of law, is a union of sovereign states mutually adopting a constitution. Well, number one, Nova Scotia voted against it and they were forced into it. So how can that be mutually adopting? They must also adopt or ratify the agreement by a plebiscite of the people. For the people under God are the origin of all just power. So the people in Nova Scotia voted, and they voted against it. Period. And they were forced into it. So you can be forced into a constitution. You can be forced into a confederation. Does that sound like the rule of law, or does that sound like the color of law? In the UK Interpretation Act, which was passed in 1889, which is 22 years after the BNA, Section 18, Paragraph 3 defines a colony. The expression colony shall mean any of Her Majesty's dominions, exclusive of the British Islands and of British India, and where parts of such dominions are under both a central legislature and local legislatures, all parts under the central legislature shall, for the purposes of this definition, to be one colony. As Canada was the only dominion with a central legislature and local legislatures in 1889, it is evident that in a court of law, Canada could not be deemed to be other than a colony, because they specifically referred to a dominion with a central legislature and local legislatures. And the only dominion was Canada. So they were referring specifically to Canada. It is a colony. The Statute of Westminster, December 11th, 1931, has since changed our status. Section 11 says, notwithstanding anything in the Interpretations Act 1889, the expression colony shall not in any act of Parliament of the United Kingdom passed after the commencement of this act include a dominion or any province or states forming part of a dominion. Canada was a colony before the commencement of the Statute of Westminster, never a confederation. United colonies, United British colonies. Confederation is a lie. It is not generally known that the Native Sons of Canada, and more particularly Assembly Number 2 of Vancouver, drafted the resolutions, which is the basis for the Statute of Westminster, a copy of which is in the Parliamentary Library. So Russell Rogers Smith and the Native Sons wrote the sections of the Statute of Westminster pertaining to Canada, and they are in the Parliamentary Library. You can't get more of a constitutional expert than the person that wrote the sections of the Statute of Westminster that freed Canada. They were written for very specific purpose and intent, and that was to free Canada, specifically the provinces, so that they could form their own constitutions, governments, and then federally unite if that was the wish of the people. Governor General without proper authority. The Statute of Westminster gives us a status of equality with Great Britain. They have no more right to issue letters patent to a Governor General to govern Canada than Canada has a right to issue letters patent to a Governor General that governs Great Britain. It makes sense. We're completely equal. Their Governor General means nothing to us now. That's their Governor General. It's up to us to form our own government now. In 1867, the Colonial Office drafted a charter which was enacted by the Imperial Parliament in a private bill or statute, uniting 4 of these colonies into one colony without altering their status of their relation to the mother country. Great Britain retained the executive power or legal sovereignty after the Union as before. In other words, they remained colonies of Great Britain, with one Governor General instead of 4 Governor Generals, and letters patent granting him the power to govern, and a committee of His Majesty's Most Honourable Privy Council to administer affairs in connection with the United Colony. In 1931, the Statute of Westminster altered this relationship and granted to Canada the right to self-government, and in order that the federal union they previously requested could be formed, granted to each province the sovereignty to create a federal union. This power was granted to them so that they could create their own government, the same as the Commonwealth of Australia, the Union of South Africa, or the Free Irish State. So freedom and autonomy was given to each province so they could form their own government. And then if the will of the people wanted a federal union, they could federally unite and adopt a federal constitution. That has still never happened, and the Canada Act 1982 is just carrying on the fraud. The Governor General and the federal government, the central legislature of Canada, ended December 11th, 1931, became a de facto government. How has the BNA Act been used? The BNA Act has been used as though it were the Constitution of Canada, which it is not. It has been used to govern Canada, and it was the intention of Lord Carnarvon and the Colonial Office that it should do so. So sure, the Colonial Office never wanted Canada to leave, so the BNA, letters patent to the Governor General, here you go. You're a colony, but you're still under British rule. But it was not the idea or intention of the House of Lords or the Commons which enacted it. So they thought they were freeing the provinces of Canada to federally unite, which is against the intent of the Colonial Office. They could not let that happen. So it's all fraud and skullduggery. The Parliament thought it was to be a guide to the creation of a federal union. They knew this could only be attained by an agreement between the provinces, so they were not particularly concerned. As has been shown in a previous section, the provinces were united into one colony, and the colonies cannot decide on an agreement, for they are not free to sign anything. They're colonies. Only the Governor General on behalf of the UK can do that. That is why, after the Act was passed, it was never returned to the provinces for their assent. So the BNA Act, a certified copy never came to Canada because they weren't free to sign anything. They were British colonies. They weren't sovereign nations. A legislature of a province may pass an act to incorporate a locality or district into a municipality, but the actual incorporation must be accomplished by the citizens of the locality. This was the idea the Imperial Parliament accepted when they enacted the BNA. They figured that the people of each province were going to form their own governments, who then could federally unite if so choose. By the terms of the Act of the Governor General, the Governor General is the government. He received his letters patent to exercise the powers of the Act from the Clerk of the Crown in Chancery. The latest letters patent were issued to Earl Bessemborough and signed by Sir Claude Schuster, March 23, 1931, 8 months prior to the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, December 11th, 1931. It's very important. So before the Statute of Westminster was enacted, 8 months before, new letters patent were issued, which was that's the way it was designed. New Governor General for Canada on behalf of the Crown. As Canada has been raised by statute to the accepted constitutional position of equality with Great Britain, the Imperial government could not grant further letters patent. We were our own country. We were not a colony any longer. There was no longer a Governor General or a central legislature. Those were all British. That all ended, became superfluous. December 11th, 1931. In a cable to the imperial authorities in October 1935, I myself protested any letters patent being issued to Lord Tweedsmuir, and he received none. So, the powers that be in Canada after the passing of the Statute of Westminster didn't want to lose their power, so they just pretended nothing changed. When everything changed, they became a de facto government because they were a central legislature of a united colony. They were not a federal government of a federally united country. So Russell Rogers Smith, they tried to get new letters patent, and in 1935, Russell Rogers Smith sent a letter to the UK saying, no, you can't issue letters patent. You don't have the authority to issue letters patent anymore. So he didn't get any. So there was no more Governor General from December 11th, 1931. And in 1935, they tried to continue the illusion by getting letters patent for Lord Tweedsmuir. Russell Rogers Smith prevented that. He got none. And this went on all the way to 1947. Without these all-important letters patent, the powers granted to the Governor General in the BNA Act cannot be legally exercised. So that ended in 1931, December 11th, 1931. And in 1935, when the crooked Canadian government tried to carry on the illusion by getting new letters patent, Russell Rogers Smith said, nope. He sent a cable to imperial authorities who also agreed, nope, we do not have authority to do that. And Lord Tweedsmuir did not receive letters patent. Without these all-important letters patent, the powers granted to the Governor General in the BNA Act cannot be legally exercised. So what did they do? Well, in 1947, because Russell Rogers Smith kept bringing this up, and it was brought up more than once in Parliament. So what did they do? They pulled another fast one. With no authority, in 1935, all of a sudden, they got the authority to grant new letters patent in 1947. Fraud. Again. Following is a synopsis of evidence presented before a special committee convened in 1935 to investigate the British North America Act. Once again, Russell Rogers Smith kept bringing all of these issues up and others until 1947, when they finally just did the whole new fraud letters patent thing. And they just kept pretending like nothing ever changed. They just ignored all the evidence. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. So here is evidence presented by the Undersecretary of State for External Affairs, Joint Law Clerk for the House of Commons, Professor of Law, University of Toronto, Professor of Political Science, Queen's University, Dr. Bouchain, the Clerk of the House of Commons, the Keeper of the Records. And this was all presented to the House of Commons February 26, 1935. So they have known ever since December 11th, 1931 that they're de facto, and they've been committing fraud against the people of Canada ever since. Now, it might be said, why not trust to growth of convention or custom altogether for necessary changes in our Constitution? The obvious manner, I think, is that the process is too slow and is applicable only in cases where unanimity has been reached. No other country in the world looks to the parliament of another country for the shaping of its constitution. This solution could only be supported if we believe that Canadians are the only people so incompetent they cannot work out a solution of their constitutional problem, and so biased that they alone among the peoples of the world cannot be trusted to deal fairly with the various domestic interests concerned. It is not safe to leave the question open and ambiguous indefinitely, for at any time a dispute on a concrete issue may arise. To retain permanently the intervention of the Parliament of the United Kingdom is either superfluous or dangerous. So, they wanted to keep the power. The feds wanted to keep the power. That's what it boils down to. That's why they didn't entrust the people of Canada, because we would have booted them out. Dr. Oliver. Furthermore, our Constitution is a law adopted by the British Parliament, exercising its incontestable right of sovereignty towards its colonies. This explains the fact that the British North America Act is not a reproduction of the Quebec resolutions. England was free to agree to the resolutions or to disregard them entirely. So they did disregard them, but they pulled a scam and started the myth of Confederation. Dr. Kennedy. I think we've got to get away from the idea that the British North America Act is a contract or treaty. I do not want to go into that, but it is true neither in history nor in law. The British North America Act is a statute and has always been interpreted as a statute. Suppose now we assume that it is necessary to have constituent powers in Canada, powers to change the Constitution. I approach that problem from two angles. First of all, I want to break the British North America Act up. We have got to ask ourselves, is the dead hand of the past to be constantly laid with numbing effect on the body politic? That is really what it amounts to. If we in Canada are not capable of interpreting our own constitution, we should not have a legislature at all. And in fact, we don't. Professor Norman Rogers. I am thoroughly convinced that the British North America Act is not a pact or a contract, either in historical or legal sense. They continue on. So you get back to this. Your start is another interprovincial conference. I'm afraid it is. I see no feasible alternative. First, it needs to be a provincial conference, though. Every province needs to decide on what type of government they want and how it's established, and write and ratify their own constitution. Then we can have interprovincial conferences. Dr. Bouchain, the clerk of the House of Commons. It is quite true that if we apply to the British North America Act the principles followed in the interpretation of statute, it is not a compact between provinces. It is an act of Parliament which does not even embody all the resolutions passed in Canada and in London prior to its passage in the British Parliament, where certain clauses that had not been recommended by the Canadian provinces were added. The Statute of Westminster has altered our status. What we want is a new constitution. We still want a new constitution for each province, and then if we desire to form the country of Canada, to have a proper federal union under a proper constitution ratified by the people of Canada. The new constitution must leave nobody with a grievance. Exactly. It has to be ratified by the people of Canada, or that's that. It's not a constitution. A spirit of conciliation should predominate. For these reasons, the task must be entrusted to an independent body in which all the elements of the country will be represented. And that's exactly it. It has to start on the provincial level with an independent body, drafting a constitution, promoting a constitution, and promoting people voting on a constitution. It's really not that hard to do, especially with the internet. How did we get the Statute of Westminster, 1931? So they kept having these constitutional conferences and this and that, and the conference is built on a constitutional fiction. Canada never had a constitution, and they're saying constitution this, constitution that, when we never did have a constitution. That all the representatives meet as equals. The test, what is Canada constitutionally, is the true test. And until Canada, either by her own act or by imperial concession, attains sovereignty as an independent nation under the crown. So they keep saying, this talk about amending constitutions and all that, it means nothing. We're still British colonies. We need to free ourselves. Then we can write our own constitutions. That position will be and remain both constitutionally and internationally that of a colonial status. Mere rhetoric cannot overcome this inescapable fact. So until Canada was freed, we're going to be a colony. That's it. And any talk about amending the Constitution is ridiculous because we're just a colony. A copy of this resolution with an affidavit signed by the custodian of the records of the Native Sons of Canada, D.H. Elliott, stating that the resolution was presented to the Assembly by Brother Russell Rogers Smith, is in the Parliamentary Library in Ottawa. So all of this is historical fact. Russell Rogers Smith and the Native Sons of Canada wrote the sections of the Statute of Westminster to free Canada, to free the provinces, to form their own governments, write their own constitutions, and if so desired, form a federal union. As Dr. Bouchain states in his evidence, the Statute of Westminster has altered our status. Section 11 states that after the commencement of the Act, no dominion nor province or state forming part of a dominion shall be considered a colony. So before December 11th, 1931, Canada was a colony. It is acknowledged that the status of Canada before the commencement of the Act was that of a colony. And it may be said in this connection that until the provinces of Canada had been elevated into a position of autonomy, they had no voice in stating how they should be governed. The Statute of Westminster altered our status by granting complete autonomy to the provinces. To the provinces. to state that because the provinces of Canada have used the BNA Act for 70 years, or because of the statute of limitations, or for the reason that the Act has been accepted as the cornerstone of Canadian law and legislation, that the BNA Act is a constitution, is not correct reasoning. It's not. It's all based on fraud. The enacting clause was repealed in 1893. The executive power to the heirs and successors of Queen Victoria was repealed in 1893. The first page was replaced before it came to Canada. It was never a constitution. It was never the Confederation of sovereign nations. It was the uniting of 4 British colonies under a Governor General. The provinces of Canada do not use the BNA Act as a whole. It is an instrument for the exercise of the powers of the Governor General. Exactly. Which ended December 31st, 1931, despite the fraud that they pulled on October 1st, 1947, and they've since done through revising the Governor General Act and so on and so forth. We may use the Act as a guide to the creation of a constitution or the basis of an agreement between the provinces, as this was the object or intention of the Parliament which enacted it, or we may disregard it entirely if we choose. Why? Because the provinces of Canada are completely autonomous today. Each province is a political unit without a political superior. And again, for those of you that are going Canada Act 1982, Canada Act 1982, Constitution Act 1982, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that was all written through the Trudeau federal government, given to the UK Parliament, passed, and not all the provinces signed it. And there was no vote by the people of Canada whatsoever. Not only that, the people of the provinces have never ratified constitutions of their own and never formally federally united. First, you have to be recognized as a sovereign nation. The provisions of Section 2 are those which grant autonomy. Autonomy is not divisible. Either you have it or you have it not. So, all the provinces are autonomous. And our governments to this day choose not to inform the people and exercise that right of autonomy. They all go on with the scam and the illusion of Confederation, the illusion of a constitution, and the illusion of Canada. Every one of them. A parliament of a dominion is not a central legislature of a colony, and no alteration of its charter can make it so. Period. Section 3 and 4 of the Statute of Westminster do not refer to the central legislature at Ottawa. This can only be construed as it states, and a parliament representing the provinces of Canada must be one whose charter is granted by an agreement between the provinces, or in other words, created by them. The Canada Act 1982 was not created by the provinces. It was created by the Trudeau government, a de facto, illegal, and unlawful government. Next step, Federated States of Canada. The story of Confederation is a myth, and those who think that Sir John A. Macdonald was the father of Confederation know little about this question. In a letter to Lord Knutsford, Secretary of State for the Colonies, at the time the first meetings were held between the states of Australia regarding a federal union in 1888, Sir John expresses his regret for the defeat of 1867 in the following words. If the statute, the BNA, had only followed the Canadian draft of the bill, Australia would have a government similar to the Kingdom of Canada. So if only the Canadian draft would have been passed, we would have had the Kingdom of Canada. And John A. Macdonald, goes on further to say, now this is the father of Confederation, I must say that I'm greatly disappointed at the course taken by the British Commissioners. They seem to have only one thing on their minds. That is to go home with a treaty in their pockets, settling everything, no matter at what cost to Canada. The effect which must be produced on the public mind in Canada by a declaration from both parties in the Imperial Parliament against our course will greatly prejudice the idea of British connection, as British connection will have proved itself a farce. I do not like to look at the consequences, but we are so clearly in the right that we must throw the responsibility on England. So the father of Confederation, would he be throwing the responsibility of the failure on England if Canada confederated? Is this the father of Confederation speaking about how successful and how proud he is about Confederation? No. If no ulterior motive was served, why were the stories of Confederation circulated? And why are they still promoted today? The big celebration in 2017, 150 years of Confederation. They're still carrying on the illusion of Confederation to this day. It never happened. It's a lie. Everything we've been taught about Canada is a lie. And that is because the people in power want to retain their power. All that can be said is the gullibility of Canadians was deplorable. It still is deplorable. Most people have no idea. They think the BNA Act is our constitution, that Canada confederated in 1867. That's what we've been taught to believe all our lives for generations and generations. It's all fraud and lies. No member of the Dominion government today would seriously contend that he knows anything about the British North America Act, for they know there is no certified copy in Canada, and anything less than an examination of a certified copy can only be classed as assumption. There is a vast difference between assumption, belief, and the ability to produce factual evidence, which in my next videos I will do through their acts and statutes. The next step is a provincial conference. Write a provincial constitution. Elect a provincial government based on that constitution. And then go interprovincial conference, where an agreement can be reached upon the powers to be conferred on a central government and the powers which must be retained by the provinces. This has to be written by the people for the people of the provinces, not Pierre Trudeau, the communist dictator wannabe. First of all, power must be conferred upon appointed representatives of the provinces so as to carry on the government of Canada, and with the power to call an election as soon as possible after the Constitution has been ratified by the people of each and all the provinces. So that's all we had to do back then. keep our provisional government, write a constitution, ratify the constitution, and elect a government, be it the provisional government or a new government. That's all we have to do today. The people of Canada have to become educated on the fraud. There's no way anything is going to change. It's their system. It's their system of control. They're not going to give it up unless we, the people, stand up and legally assert our rights, which is to write our own constitution, form our own governments in every province, which is a sovereign nation, every province and territory. On the opposite page is set forth the exact wording, the first page of the BNA Act, containing the preamble of the Act, which has not been published in official copies of the statutes either in Great Britain or Canada. So this is the one that passed the House of Lords, that they thought they were passing to free Canada. British North America Act, enacted by Queen Victoria, Imperial Parliament, by reason of the request of the colonies for federal government. It is expedient, therefore, that they have laws and regulations to guide them. The first page of the British North America Act was deleted after passing the House of Lords and before it was assented to by the House of Commons. This page states, by reason of request to the colonies for federal government, it is expedient, therefore, that they have laws and regulations to guide them. The true preamble. Here we have the reason and purpose of the Act. If this page had not been deleted, Canada would e'er have formed a federal government. So if we would have got our way, which our delegates, we would have had a federal government. The colonial office couldn't allow that, so they pulled this big scam, which is still being perpetrated today, the illusion of Canada. We did not federate in 1867, and the Governor General was a corporation sole until the Statute of Westminster was enacted. What are we now? We're nothing. We're the illusion of Canada in a system of control. We are certainly not a confederation, as there has been no confederation since that date. And again, if you think we confederated in 1982, it's all based on fraud and lies by a de facto government, assented by a foreign monarch and passed through a foreign parliament. It wasn't written by the people of Canada. It wasn't written by the provinces. It was written by the wannabe dictator, Pierre Trudeau. There has been no confederation since that date. The authority was given to the provinces. Ottawa was never a province or a colony. How did it get authority? Ottawa was the central legislature of the colony. December 11th, 1931, they became de facto. There is no province of Ottawa. There is no colony of Ottawa. The federal government owns no land. The federal government doesn't have eminent domain. They rent their land from the province of Ontario. Ottawa was never a province or a colony. How did it get authority? It was only a committee of men, half appointed and half elected, to aid and advise the Governor General. Now, there was no accredited Governor General and no need for a committee to aid and advise him. Once again, the Governor General ended December 11th, 1931. The provinces are sovereign and will remain so until we, the people, through our provincial governments, create a country, which we still to this day have not done. And until we, the people, stand up and take back the country that was clearly stolen from us, the power the central legislature usurped in 1931 and desperately clings to today, none of those problems are going to change until we, the people, change them. They all know about this information. They have since 1935. They all know it's a big game and a big scam and a big fraud. And until we stop it, it will never stop.